Hey everyone, I'm Braden. I'm CTO at OpenCraft, and I'm going to be talking about Meilisearch in OpenEdX and replacing Elasticsearch.
So yeah, I've just structured my talk today about search in OpenEdX as past, present, and future, a little bit like the Christmas Carol. So we'll start our tour with the oldest search features in the platform. And even though I'm calling it the past, these are all still here. They just haven't changed very much over time. So yeah, I wanted to give an overview of all the ways that search is used in OpenEdX. Um, the first one, and the one that most people see first when they encounter the platform, would be the mini course directory. Now, big instances usually do their own thing for a course listing, like edX.org has their own complete catalog website, which is totally separate, but small OpenEdX users and DevStack users use the built-in course directory, which is what you see here. It's pretty basic, but it has a keyword search field, and it has basic filtering, so you can choose to filter courses by language or subject or a couple other topics. So that's number one. Number two is the course content search. So as a learner, when you go into a course or you're in the middle of a course, you can search through the course and find something in the course. But this is not on by default, and it's also a tiny little link in the top right corner. I was just curious, who has used this course search before? Has anyone? Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's very heavily used, to say the least. And edX.org had it off for a long time for performance reasons, which I will get into a bit later. As I'll mention, I am hoping that we can move to having this on by default and making it more useful for learners. Right now, it's not used very much. Otherwise, the discussion forum, pretty straightforward. Students can post and have discussions, and then there's a search field. It's very basic, again, just a keyword search, but if you want to find something in the discussion, there's a built-in search. And also the Teams feature, if you're not familiar with this feature, it lets learners form groups and then work on problems together. And there is a search field that you can use to find a team that you might want to join relevant to your interests. Again, pretty basic. You enter a keyword and you find a team. Then the last one that I'm going to mention is technically a search use, but it's more administrator facing, and that's in the discovery service, also known as the catalog service. And it uses Elasticsearch and search queries to define groups of courses. So you can say something like, any course from MIT or Harvard since 2023, and put those all into a course catalog that you call mass courses, and then you can do something with that course catalog. And this screen is a sort of operator administrator tool to test out those queries, put in keywords, and then see which courses match and make sure you have the right courses in your catalog. This is not on by default. The discovery service is not included by default in the OpenEdX platform. It's kind of an add-on that you can use. So I'm going to kind of ignore it for the rest of this talk. I'm also working to deprecate it and have a deprecate proposal out to get rid of it. But I did want to mention it because it is a search feature technically. So here you have the core four, the built-in search experiences in OpenEdX. As you can see, they're all pretty basic. And the UI is pretty basic and the features are pretty basic. Only one has anything beyond keywords, and that is basic filtering. But of these, it might not be obvious, but one is way more complex than all the others. And that is the course content search that you see in the top right. We'll get into how that works a bit right now, because I think it's worth doing a little bit of a deep dive. This is how it worked up until the Teak release. So we're still in the past part of the talk. Basically, when the learner enters the keywords, those keywords are sent to the LMS, and then the LMS sends the query on to Elasticsearch, which is the search engine that we've used in the past. Elasticsearch then does its search indexing and finds the matching documents from the course and sends them back to the LMS. But here's an important part of how this search works. At this point, you can see in my example, 10 results have gone back to the LMS. The LMS says, hold on a second, this user is not allowed to see all of those, and then it will filter out the results based on what the user is allowed to see. And so it may only send, say, 3 results to the user. And there's a huge number of reasons this can be. It could be cohorts that the user is in. It could be randomization of content. It could be split tests or content experiments. It could be release dates for the course. It could be prerequisites, exams. This gets very complicated. And the way this was implemented is also kind of inefficient. It actually, instead of checking each result if the learner is allowed to see it, instead it first goes through the whole course and gets a complete list of all the components that the learner is allowed to see. And then it matches the results against that list. So even if there's only one result, it's actually checking the entire course for the learner's permissions. And this is unfortunately a bit CPU intensive. So that's part of the reason this was turned off on edX.org for a long time, because it would noticeably slow down the LMS servers and tie up resources when they'd had this search feature turned on. However, it's very difficult to design around that because of the complexity of all those rules that I said, and finding a way around that is difficult. I do think it could be optimized by checking each result instead of loading the whole course, as I said. But yeah, we'll look at other ways of improving this. The other thing, just in case you're wondering, how does Elasticsearch know the content of the search? That's what you see up in the corner there. Whenever you make any edit in Studio, we take the content, strip it down to the text version of the content, and then send that content to Elasticsearch. So anytime an edit is made to the course, the Elasticsearch index gets updated, and it always contains a copy of all the text that's in the course. There are some challenges with Elasticsearch. Regis posted on the forum about this. He considers Elasticsearch to be the biggest memory hog in the whole OpenEdX stack. A default install with nothing going on. No content can still use, what does it say, 1.5 gigs of RAM. And I don't know who the second person is, but they posted on the forum just saying, hey, I set up OpenEdX and something called Elasticsearch is taking up all of the memory, 40%. And it's ridiculous what's going on. So when it comes to servers, memory is one of the most expensive resources we can allocate. And when Elasticsearch uses a lot of memory, that means it costs a lot. Another challenge with Elasticsearch as our search engine is if you try to reduce those costs by sharing Elasticsearch, historically it was impossible. Now it's merely difficult. And we've figured out how to do that. In the Harmony project, we have tooling that you can use to share an Elasticsearch cluster. Basically, you deploy one big Elasticsearch instance and you use it for lots of separate OpenEdX sites, and it will bring those costs down for you. It's still a pain to manage, and I recommend avoiding it if you can, which is part of what this talk is about. Then, as I mentioned, the way that all those requests go through the LMS and get filtered there with this expensive computation to check permissions ties up the LMS CPU. Then, when you saw those core 4 search experiences, you might have noticed each one has a totally different user interface, and they're all very basic. Part of that is because Elasticsearch doesn't really have a good toolkit that you can use to build UIs, especially in React, and we don't have any standards around what a search UI in OpenEdX is supposed to look like. And I kind of glossed over one technical detail, which is this library called edXsearch that we use between the LMS and Elasticsearch. If you're interested, on the wiki, there's a whole article that somebody else wrote about why edXsearch sucks and is difficult to use. And each search experience uses it in a different and incompatible way. So if you're interested, you can look up that article on the wiki. But I'd like to move to happier things in the present. Enter Meilisearch. Meilisearch is an alternative search engine which has been developed since about 2019. And last year, in the start of 2024, we started seriously looking at it as a replacement for Elasticsearch in the OpenEdX platform. Jeremy Bowman from 2U pointed out that 2U had basically stopped using Elasticsearch for anything, and any new features that they built with search were using a proprietary search engine called Algolia. And Algolia is just way easier to use. It has a nice UI toolkit that works out of the box in React. And so they've been building lots of little mini search experiences throughout their proprietary parts of the platform using Algolia and having good success with that. And he pointed out, hey, there's this open source thing called Meilisearch that looks very similar to Algolia, has a lot of the same benefits. Maybe we should consider using it for OpenEdX. At the time, we were just kicking off a project to add new search features to Studio and looking for a technology to use. So this was all part of a big, long discussion that happened on the forums, but we decided to go ahead with using Meilisearch as the backend for our new search features and see if it would improve on some of these challenges that we've been facing. So in 2024, we built Studio Course Search, and we used Meilisearch as the backend for this feature. And here you can see, this is the Studio UI. So this is the new search interface. You can access it from the header, and it brings up a modal. And unlike the previous searches, now you can search all courses in Studio at once if you want to. It will take your permissions into account. You can search within a single course, or you can search all courses. And you can see a richer preview of results. It shows you the type of each result. It shows you a snippet of where it matched your search query. You can filter by the type of content that you want to search for. And a new feature that was quite complicated to build actually was also searching by tags. So you can use the tagging and taxonomy feature to add tags to all your content to organize it. And then when you're searching, you can use those same search tags to filter the content and find it based on those tags. That seemed to work really well, and we got good feedback about it. So when we moved on to building our content libraries, revamped UI, we decided to use Meilisearch for it. And this time, the whole UI is based on search. So even though this kind of looks like a browse UI, this whole thing is just a search UI coming directly from the search engine. And again, you have the filters and keyword search that you can see up there. We were really happy with this approach of using search as the main UI for this. When we tested it with libraries with up to 10,000 components in them, it still works in milliseconds, and you can browse just as fast as if there's almost no content at all. So it's a very performant experience, and also very feature-rich with all these filters that we have here. So I'd like to highlight how that speed is possible in the new Studio Search UI. If we go back to how the LMS search worked, this is how it worked before Teak. This is how it worked after Teak. We just swapped in Meilisearch instead of Elasticsearch. I should mention, so at this point, we had used Meilisearch for the two new Studio Search experiences. And then Regis and the folks at Tutor and Edley got very excited about Meilisearch and its lower memory requirements. So they did this amazing project where in like a couple weeks, they replaced Elasticsearch with Meilisearch in all of those other four the core four search experiences that we had in the platform. So just in time for the Teak release, they implemented the ability to use either Elasticsearch or Meilisearch for all the search features, and gladly ripped out Elasticsearch from the default Tutor distribution, put in Meilisearch, and published that as Teak release. So in Teak, not only the two new Studio experiences, but also the original four are all using Meilisearch. And it didn't actually require a lot of changes to the code because of how basic those search experiences are. They're just keyword search, and they're not using a lot of sophisticated features. So that was a big win. in terms of memory use. But they didn't change the way that this fundamentally works for the course search, and you're still using the LMS to filter the results and so on. For the new studio experiences we built, we took a completely different approach. So now in the user's browser for these studio things, when you enter a search keyword, we send it directly to Meilisearch, not contacting Studio at all. And then Meilisearch sends the results directly to the user's browser. And this means that literally as you type, within milliseconds, you get the search results. As fast as you can type, the search results are streaming to your browser. And that works no matter what the size of the library is. So the reason we can do that is in part because Studio's permission system is a lot simpler than the LMS. We don't have to deal with cohorts or content experiments or any of those things. In Studio, everything is either you have access to this course or you don't. Either you have access to this library or you don't. So what we do is when the user wants to do a search, they ask Studio for a token, which is basically like a little driver's license that says, I'm Braden and I have access to courses A and B and libraries D, E, and F. And technically it's a JSON web token or a JOT, so it's cryptographically signed. Studio can generate it instantly. It doesn't have to make an API request to Meilisearch. And then as a user with that driver's license, I can go to Meilisearch and say, hey, I'm authorized to make searches. Please do this search for me. And Meilisearch will automatically apply filters to make sure you're only seeing the courses that you're allowed to see. Because it's signed, you can't forge it or edit it, so you can't get access to anything that you're not supposed to. But this lets us get instant results because we can skip this step of using the LMS or Studio to filter the search results. So Meilisearch seems like a lot better. We get instant search results. We can do this cool direct connection to the Meilisearch. It's a newer search engine, and I think the results have better relevance and quality, although that's a little subjective. The costs are significantly lower because it uses way less memory. A default Meilisearch installation uses like 2 megabytes of memory, and then it slowly increases as you get more data up to a point, but it never gets crazy high. We can enforce permissions without using something like Studio in the middle because of this JSON web token feature. And another nice thing about Meilisearch is they have a very consistent release process every 2 to 3 months. So it's happened during the course of this project that I wished it could do something, and then later I go to check and there's a new version that can do that. So it's been great. As a developer, Meilisearch has been very easy to work with. Their documentation is excellent. Their Python and JavaScript libraries are provided by them and are almost identical in how they work. So it's very easy to learn. And there's this really nice React JavaScript library made by the Algolia folks called instantsearch.js. And it's compatible with Meilisearch. So if you want to build a UI, you basically just pop in those components. You can inject Paragon into them so that they're styled with Paragon, but they're still using all the search functionality you want. And you get a really nice search UI with filtering or keywords or whatever you want, infinite scroll, anything that you need. They have components to make it easy to do. So it makes it much easier to build the UI side of things. It's not all perfect, though. There have been some challenges with Meilisearch. And the main one that people in the community have been talking with us about is the fact that there's no high availability for Meilisearch. So normally what you want in a highly available setup, you can have several separate copies of Meilisearch, and then if one of them goes offline, you can just redirect queries to another one that's still online, and your site never stops being able to serve search functions. Meilisearch doesn't have that support yet, so right now, if Meilisearch goes down, then your search features will be unavailable until you get it back online. We have found that it's very stable, and we haven't really had issues with that, but for sites that have a requirement, like a formal requirement for high availability or are concerned about this, then it is definitely a challenge. There's also no managed offering from AWS. So AWS provides OpenSearch, which is similar to Elasticsearch. and they provide MySQL and other databases that you might want to use. So if you want to run Meilisearch on AWS, you have to deploy it yourself, just on a server or in the cloud in Kubernetes or anything like that. They don't have a managed offering where they manage it for you. There is a Meilisearch company, and they have a cloud offering, and they offer high availability, and they offer cloud hosting and all that. So you can pay them if you want to pay somebody to do it, but it's also very easy to just use Tutor to set up Meilisearch for you on Kubernetes. This is a pretty minor one, but it doesn't have a data type for dates that have a time zone. So if you need to store that type of data, which I guess has come up in certain course contexts, you have to store it as 2 separate fields, but it's not really a deal breaker as far as I'm concerned. And then the code that I originally wrote for how we set up the Meilisearch indexes and how you populate them with your course data and your library data during an instance upgrade is admittedly a bit problematic right now, and we need to find ways to improve it and make it more user-friendly. Right now, it basically takes a long time to index your data, and if you're in the middle of an upgrade, that's not what you want. So there are ways you can make it just do the index creation, and then later you can migrate your data, but it's not very intuitive how to do that. So we're going to be improving that in the future OpenEdX releases. It also used to be a pain to upgrade Meilisearch. You had to do a backup and then update it and then restore from the backup. But thankfully, they've improved that in recent versions. So now you just have to run an upgrade command and you get the newest version. It's as easy as it should be. So of this whole list, the only really significant problem that I think is worth serious discussion is the high availability issue. And for that reason, we've been looking at an alternative search engine as well called TypeSense. It's also open source. It also has a lot of the features that Meilisearch has, and it has high availability. The downside with TypeSense is that it stores all your data in memory. So if you have a lot of data to search, you need a lot of memory, and that can get expensive. So we're kind of trying to decide right now as a community if we want to just go all in on Meilisearch, or if we want to support Meilisearch and TypeSense as 2 alternatives, or even Meilisearch and TypeSense and Algolia as 3 alternatives, and you can kind of choose which one works best for your OpenEdX installation. There's trade-offs to each approach. Going all in on Meilisearch lets us use a lot more of the features it has and do more advanced and sophisticated search techniques. Supporting all 3 requires us to do the kind of common minimal feature set that they have, but they're all great search engines and they all have a lot of features. So that is an option that we're considering, and any feedback would be welcome as we're approaching the future OpenEdX releases. Before this talk, I reached out to Regis, who's the author of Tutor, and I wanted to know, like, I know you switched to Meilisearch as the default. Has it been a good move, or has it been leading to problems and complaints? And the answer is an unequivocal yes. Memory usage is down from everyone's Tutor environments, and bug reports related to search have been down as well. There just haven't been many. I guess the main ones have been related to this upgrade command, which is actually my code, not Meilisearch. So we'll be working on that in the future. So that's been great to hear. Then looking out to the future, I would love to see some love paid to these Core 4 search experiences. I think there's a lot that can be done to make them more useful. For example, the learner course search could search all courses instead of just searching one course at a time. I think if your use case involves anything like a degree program or like a series of courses on the same topic, I can imagine learners might not remember which course something was in, but they want to find, oh, where was that lecture on Brownian motion or whatever. Being able to search all the courses that you've taken, or even just as a learner, I've taken a lot of MOOCs online and I want to remember that really good video I saw about some topic. It would be great to be able to search those. Because, for example, Google doesn't index the search content. It's not public. So the only way you can search a lot of these Open edX courses is using a tool like this. And being able to search all of them, I think, would be a great improvement. The other thing I would love to see is eliminating that LMS permissions check bottleneck for search in the courses and finding a way to make it work more like we did in Studio, where we let Meilisearch know the permissions rules, and then when you search, it enforces those permissions and gives you the results directly. That's something it can do very fast. There are some technical limitations on how you implement something like that, so it's a little bit of an architecture exercise to figure out if it's possible and how we can make it work, given how complicated LMS permissions are. But I think it's a tractable problem, and I think it would be great to solve, and then it would let us more comfortably turn these features on by default and get people using them. And I think it would be a prerequisite to being able to search all courses at once instead of just searching one course at a time. I would also love to see the UI improved. As you can see, there hasn't been a lot of time spent on the UI of those search experiences. Better previews of the results. For example, if you get a video result, it should show a thumbnail of the video. If it's images, you see images, that sort of thing. And turning them on by default. Right now, as we saw, hardly anyone knows about or uses the course search. The edX enterprise team at 2U has been investing in a lot of search features in their proprietary side of the platform that they use for their enterprise customers. So I wanted to look at some of the nice work they've been doing. For example, this is their Find a Course UI. So this would be more similar to the mini course directory that I showed as the number one example in this talk. But you can see it looks a lot nicer. They've invested in the UX, and there's a lot more filters available to find the results that are relevant to you. They also very recently added a new feature that lets you search for videos from all courses on their platform. So not just courses you've enrolled in, but I guess the idea here is that you can find a video on a certain topic and then just take that video almost as a mini course. So they're exposing videos in their search results just on their own. You don't have to go into the course and enroll to play the video. And you can just take these like 12-minute videos that you search for on any topic through this user interface. It's a cool example of new functionality that you can get from search in the platform that we haven't really thought about something like that yet. You might also think search is just search, but search engines can do a lot of other features. One is recommendations. Everyone is familiar with this sort of UI that customers also bought, or these are the top 10 in your region today, or if you like this, you might like that. Search engines can do that very easily. So they have all the data about the relationships between things and the topics on them, and you can easily exploit that to produce these sort of UIs. In fact, edX.org is doing that. If you sign up for an account on edX.org, you'll fill out your profile, and then the very next screen you'll see is this one, where it will say, based on the interest you put in your profile, you might be interested in one of these courses. This is just on edX.org as far as I know, but the UI is the code is in our MFEs, and we could be doing stuff like this if someone wants to roll it out as a product feature, and I think it would be really cool. This is using Algolia, by the way, but we can do the same thing with Meilisearch, and the APIs are all very similar. Also, the frontier in search is kind of AI-powered search, and it lets you do a lot more relevant search results. So you can use a vector store to store the keywords and stuff related to your content. So when Meilisearch indexes your content, it actually does a traditional search index for all the keywords that you mentioned in the text, but it can also create a vector search index where it uses machine learning and embeddings to convert each keyword into a vector in vector space. And basically what that allows you to do is search by the meaning of words rather than just the keyword. So if you search for fruit, you can get a match for apple, even though those are different keywords. So traditional search won't do that very easily, but with AI-powered vector search, you get that automatically, and it makes the search results way more relevant because it basically knows what you mean when you search. I see some of this in the crowd. So Meilisearch has a lot of features to make that possible. If you want to turn that on, you can, and there's functionality you can build out using that. They have a great blog post, which is what I screenshotted here, where they go into a lot of the details on how that works and what it makes possible, and some customer case studies of their e-commerce sites and so on, where they really increased conversion rates by turning on the vector search features. The pros can be better search results, but the cons also can be a lot more resource usage and other cons that come with using AI. For example, potential bias or missing results for no reason that you can't debug and so on. So just summarizing what we've covered, in the past, we had these 4 core experiences and the discovery service. They were using Elasticsearch. What we have now in the latest OpenEdX releases, we have these 2 new studio search features, and we're generally recommending Meilisearch, but if you want to, you can still run those 4 core experiences with Elasticsearch. You can't run the new features with Elasticsearch, so if you don't have Meilisearch, you won't be able to use those features. And then in the future, I've kind of said some of the things that I would like to see, but we don't have any particular projects to build them at the moment. And we're trying to decide if we're just going to use Meilisearch or if we want to support maybe Meilisearch and TypeSense as alternative search engines for people. And I'd welcome any feedback about use cases related to that. That's the end of my presentation. So I was wondering if there's any questions.
Well, I have several small questions, so feel free to stop me at any, and I will ask you the other ones.
Can we do them one at a time? That's fine.
Well, the first one is really easy. So I guess with Meilisearch, we don't have to worry about wanting to share it between instances like we.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we can actually do either. Meilisearch makes it very easy to set up multi-tenancy. If you want, you can do one big Meilisearch installation and share it with every OpenEdX instance you have on a cluster. I don't recommend that because there's not much point to it. Yeah. Meilisearch is so lightweight, you can just deploy as many instances as you need, and that's what Tutor does by default, so that's what I'm recommending people do. Yeah.
And about the high availability thing, we all know that the only thing that's more time consuming that for Elasticsearch to start is for Elasticsearch to shut down. What about Meili? Does it start and shut down more quickly?
It starts almost instantly, and in fact, that's how the Meilisearch company kind of builds their feature that they claim it. They call it high availability. It's not actually replicated. They just have all these sort of alarms set on Kubernetes and redundant clusters available so that if your instance goes offline, they spin a new one up within milliseconds. And that's their version of high availability. If you have a lot of experience with this sort of administration, you could set something similar like that up for Meilisearch and OpenEdX. And yeah, it does start up very fast. So that's one of the architectural requirements they put in when they design Meilisearch, and it's a very nice aspect of it.
Okay, and to finish, the reason I was doing this about the word meaning, AI word meaning in searches is that it's a common meme in the tech community that when you search for how to implement a binary tree in Python, with this feature you get the information on snakes that lives in baobabs. It does a bit the opposite of what you want.
Yeah, I haven't actually tried the AI search features myself to see how well they work. But in their blog posts that I mentioned, they do say that they found customers have achieved, OKR improvements substantially by turning it on. So I think it does, even though it's not perfect and it can have, negatives like that it catches. I think it's still an improvement.
Okay, I have a quick question about, you say that in TIC we are grab the permissions from Studio, we don't pass from LMS, right? I remember the two diagrams you show, the first one with the Elasticsearch and the LMS, and then you only use the Studio permissions. Is available right now in TIC?
So before Teak,
Okay.
this is what we had. After Teak, we just switched in Meilisearch, but
Okay.
the LMS search features all work exactly the same way.
Okay.
There's no changes to them. They're still using the LMS to compute permissions. But the new Studio search features use this direct approach. So in Studio, we don't check permissions in the same way, and we use Meilisearch directly. You have to expose Meilisearch to the public internet, and the user's browser directly talks to the Meilisearch API.
Okay, and another question, where we can find more information about the conversation about Meilisearch and TypeSense.
Oh yeah,
There is
that's a good
space.
example. I should have linked to it. There's
Don't worry.
an issue where we're having a big discussion about that.
Okay.
I can send it to you. I can post it on Slack.
Okay, perfect.
Or on Whova. I guess is there a comments channel for each session on Whova?
There is, but also which channel on Slack are you going to post it in, so that way people.
Well, I'll just post it on Whova on this session if that makes sense.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
I'm just thinking about people that watch the recording later, so where they might be able to find that conversation.
Okay, I can post it on Slack as well. On
Please.
What would be a good channel? Dev?
Yeah, that
Okay,
is good.
I'll post it on the Dev Slack channel.
Okay, thank you.
And this might be too specific, but for deployments that don't utilize Tutor, have you had experience deploying Meilisearch?
Not personally. During testing and development, I've deployed it myself a few times just for testing environments, but I haven't done a separate production environment. If you're using Kubernetes, it's very easy to deploy Meilisearch. And depending on your operational requirements and perspective, you don't necessarily need to back it up or anything. You can always recreate the index if anything goes wrong. So you don't even need much in the way of persistent data volumes or stuff like that. It's pretty easy to set up.
Thank you.
You look like you needed the exercise. So. I'll be honest, I think all this is great, but I don't care about the back end. So, that's why I waited till last. How do we give input into how, where, and for whom search results show up?
So I think that would all fall under the product proposal process that we've been formalizing. And at this conference, there's been a lot of talk about how we can refine that process and improve it. As far as I know, there's not really any active discussions about a lot of those search features. So it might be more that you start a discussion about it. And that can happen in any of the online community spaces. If we're not ready for a formal product proposal around it, we can just start an informal discussion on the forum or something like that. And it would be great to see that sort of discussion happening.
I do not use to OpenADS component, but I would like to know how token are generated. I mean, do you use the default one when the user is connect, or per search you sign a new one to grab permission inside that?
So you're talking about this token here? Yeah. So we generate a unique token for each user, and it encodes their exact permissions based on what courses they're allowed to access in Studio. And you use the Meilisearch API to do that. So it has a function that's called create a tenant token. There is also a sort of master token for Meilisearch, which lets you search anything. Obviously, we don't want to give that to users. That's what our backend is using. So Studio has that token internally, and it uses that to compute a restricted tenant token. And it's very quick and easy to generate them. It's just some math that you use to compute the JOT based on the public key of the Meilisearch server. And then you give that token to each user. You can set the expiry date. I think it lasts for a day and is unique to each user. And it encodes the list of courses and libraries that the user is allowed to see. We had an interesting technical challenge because JOTs are limited to 2 kilobytes or something like that, and our course IDs and library IDs are very long in OpenEDX. But we found that if we convert each one to an integer, then we can encode as many course IDs and library IDs as we need into the JOT. So we have a lookup table where you have like single-digit integer IDs and map them onto courses. That's how we worked around that limitation.
Well, building on top of that question, what happens when permissions change? Do you need to like reindex, or is the token like regenerated with every search?
So it depends what's happening, but usually if you add a user to a course or you add a user to a library, all that they would have to do is refresh the page, and we actually generate a new token for them at that time. So it would now include their permissions for those courses and those libraries, and they would get access to it. If you revoke the user's permission and they did not refresh the page, they could still keep using their token to search the revoked course or library for up to 24 hours or whatever you configure the token timeout to. But because it's all just done at the course level or the library level, it's pretty fast and easy to change permissions. So we generate everything in real time pretty much. We don't have delayed caching beyond the token itself.
You mentioned also wanting to choose a similar model when it comes to the learning search. How do you think that would work with the limitation of JWT? Because for a user, it won't just be courses, it'll be like content in the courses as well that would need to be limited. So how would that mechanism work?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's an interesting technical challenge to solve. It's essentially, can you encode the user's permissions in less than 2 kilobytes or something like that? And there's a number of ways I've thought about answering that question, and it also depends on whether you're searching one course or all courses on the platform. But essentially, one way to do it would be to codify the permissions rules very explicitly. Right now in the LMS, the permissions code is kind of a mess, and if you wanted to know if a user has permission to see something, I couldn't really point you to a formal flow chart where we can figure it out by hand. You basically have to ask the LMS and see what it says about, is the user authorized to do that? So there's an ongoing project, the role-based access and control project, that's trying to clean up the way permissions work. And I think if we can get to a point where we have essentially a simple flow chart of, is the user in a cohort? Is this in a split test content experiment? Is this randomized content? Is the release date passed or not? Where you can summarize all those rules and the system agrees that those are the permissions, then we can find a way to encode them into the search index. So you can say, for example, this piece of content, this X block, is visible to cohort 1 and 2. And then in your jot, you can say this user has permission to see cohort 1 and 2. And Meilisearch could enforce those permissions. If the permissions were way too complicated, or we have way too many content experiments going on, or too much randomized content where each little component has hundreds of variations, then it might get too messy to do it that way. So another approach is just index the 95% of content that all users are allowed to see in each course, and then just exclude the more complicated stuff with really elaborate rules from the search results, or add them in as a separate result that is processed by Studio and injected into the results later, something like that. So I don't know if there's a perfect answer, but I think there's a few things we can try, and we can get to something that's more performant and avoids the issues we've had. Even if we just refactor this model so that this permissions checking that happens in the middle doesn't load everything from the whole course and then compare your results against that list, but just starts with your results and then confirms that you have permission to see those before it passes them on, that would already be a huge improvement in performance. So there's definitely low-hanging fruit.
All right, well, I think that's all the time that we have for questions. Thanks, everybody, for the great questions. Thanks, Braden, for the great talk.
Thanks, everyone.